Hello everyone, I'm Priyadarshini Mara, faculty at the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. Today I'm going to talk to you about module number 25, which deals with the life and works of Nagarjuna. And this module belongs to paper number 11 of Philosophy of Buddhism Part 1. When we talk about life and works of Nagarjuna, first of all we need to see who Nagarjuna is. Nagarjuna is a famous Buddhist scholar. So now let us begin with an introductory part on Nagarjuna and what did he actually do, or the school that he propounded in Buddhism. Madhyam Pratipad, or the middle way, is the characterization given by the Buddha to his philosophical doctrine. So when we see Madhyam Pratipad, or the middle way, is how Buddha characterizes his doctrine, his philosophical paradigm. Evolving on the lines of Buddha's middle way, Nagarjuna seized upon this Madhyam marg and hence termed his philosophical paradigm to be Madhyamik. So when we look at Madhyamik philosophy of Buddhism, Nagarjuna is the one who developed it, who established it. And he did this on the lines of Buddha's Madhyam Pratipad. Madhyamev Madhyamakam, and the source of it came to be known as Madhyamik Shastra. So when we look at Madhyamik school, it comes out of Madhyamev Madhyamakam, and the source of it is supposed to be Madhyamik Shastra. Hence, the philosophers of this system were named as Madhyamiks. Madhyamik school has philosophers who are called Madhyamiks. In the true sense of the term, this philosophical aspect avoids the two extreme of substantialism and nihilism. When we call a Madhyamik system to be middle way on the lines of the philosophical aspect of the middle way of Buddha, Sakyamuni Buddha himself, then what is this middle way? What are we trying to avoid? So here, according to Nagarjuna, on the lines of Sakyamuni Buddha, middle way points out to the avoidance of substantialism as well as nihilism. These are the two extremes and opposites. So, avoiding them, we develop a middle way, and that is Madhyamik. Substantialism refers to seeing the world in a solid form as here and now. And what is nihilism? Nihilism refers to the world as purely an illusion. Now, if you look at substantialism and nihilism, these are two different extremes. One states that the world is a solid form, here and now, whereas the other one states that everything is purely an illusion. Therefore, Nagarjuna's work bring out the critical evaluation of substantialism and nihilism and formulates the middle path, avoiding these two extremes, stating the constant flow of phenomenal existence endowed with arising and passing away of all its constituents. When we look at the phenomenal existence, what is phenomenal existence? Phenomenal existence is endowed with arising and with passing away of all the constituents. There is nothing in the phenomenal existence which does not live forever. So therefore, every existent being is in a constant flow of arising and passing. And hence here we pointing out to this constant flux of the phenomenal existence in order to avoid substantialism and nihilism and bring out a middle path. Nagarjuna's philosophical theory clearly identifies a separate turn in the history. How does it clearly identifies a separate turn in history? By denying certain most fundamental philosophical assumptions. When we look into the history, there are certain most fundamental philosophical assumptions, and this is what Nagarjuna denies in order to propound his own idea or doctrines. So, this is the basic introduction as to what Madhyamik system is, and Nagarjuna, who is the propounder of Madhyamik system, as to how he developed on the lines of middle path as given by the Buddha himself. Now, when we look at our topic, it is about life and works of Nagarjuna. So, let us begin with life of Nagarjuna. Time period of Nagarjuna seems to be a controversial issue in history. So, there is no particular time period which scholars agree on to. However, between all the controversies regarding birth and death of Nagarjuna, historians have come to a consensus or conclusion that the Buddhist philosopher and the establisher of Madhyamik system, Nagarjuna, lived somewhere around 150 to 200 CE or AD. He was born in a Brahmin family in Vidarbha, which is located between Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh in southern India. Nagarjuna has many legends associated with him. There is a particular legend associated with his name. So when we look at these texts, old texts of Jatak and Nagarjuna, so we have certain legends or the mythological stories or narratives associated with every character of these schools. So Nagarjuna, the name Nag, means a serpent or a dragon. The mythological narrative states that Nagarjuna was born under a tree named Arjun. This is how he got the latter half of his name. And so when we look at this word Nagarjuna, we say that Naga Arjun was born under this tree named Arjun, and that's how he got his name, the latter half of his name. Then he visited the submarine kingdom which belonged to Nags, the serpents. Here, the Nag king himself transmitted the Mahapragya Paramita Sutra to Nagarjuna. This sutra of highest knowledge was entrusted to Nags by the Buddha. Nag, which literally means a serpent dragon, is symbolic of wisdom. The Buddha is said to have remarked, "The serpent is a name for one who has destroyed ashavas, which means passion." Therefore, it can be interpreted that the Pragya Paramita teachings may have been bestowed upon Nags who probably were Arhants. Who are Arhants? Arhants are the ones who have developed bodhicitta and are on the path to attain enlightenment. And it is further believed that they must have handed down this teaching of Pragya Paramita to Nagarjuna. So this is the story which is behind the name, how Nagarjuna attained his name. Works of Nagarjuna. Let us come to the works of Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna developed and perfected the Madhyamik thought. A lot of literature could have been ascribed to Madhyamik philosophy, but unfortunately, most of the works of Mahayana Buddhism was completely lost from India. Although the translated work compiled by various scholars still remains in Chinese, Japanese and Tibetan. The Mahayanic work is mostly in Sanskrit. Pragya Paramita, Sadharmapundrika, Kashyap Vahirit are the most important Mahayana Sutra. Nagarjuna developed a commentary on Pragya Paramita Sutras, and this commentary was called Pragya Paramita Shastra. One of the most important works of Nagarjuna was Pragyaparamita Shastra, which was a commentary on Pragyaparamita Sutra. Many other important literary works can be ascribed to Nagarjuna. Buddhism mentions 6 most important treatises to be of Nagarjuna, and these are classified under the following 3 heads. So the first classification is the argumentative work. One would be the fundamental wisdom of middle way, which is called Mool Madhyamik Karika. So when we look at these 3 different heads, the first one is the argumentative work, and under this head of argumentative work, we have Mool Madhyamik Karika or wisdom of the middle way. This is one of the most important texts of Nagarjuna, or the work compiled or written by Nagarjuna. It is in 450 stanzas. It expounds the entire compass of his thought and constitutes the central text of philosophy of the middle way. It has been commented upon by a large number of later authors. So when we look at Mool Madhyamik Karika, we see that if we divide the word, it has Mool and then Madhyamik and Karika. So Mool here means one of the most important, the basic, and Madhyamik is the middle way, and Karika is the text. So we see that Mool Madhyamik Karika formulates one of the most important works of Nagarjuna. It is further divided into 27 chapters, and it constitutes the basic teachings of Shunyata, Pratitya Samutpad, causality, and nothingness or impermanence. So these are the basic teachings which are present in Mool Madhyamik Karika, and it formulates the crux of the entire philosophical work or the literary work of Nagarjuna. Second text is Yukti Shastika, or the 60 stanzas on reasoning. It is a shorter treatise discussing the notion of emptiness and dependent origination, which is also called Pratitya Samutpad. Then comes the 70 stanzas on emptiness, which is called Shunyata Shaptati. Another short treatise dealing in addition with questions of agency and the 2 truths. So when we look at Shunyata Shaptati, it is a short treatise dealing with in addition with questions of agency. So it talks about the basic essence of existence and also the 2 truths, which is Samvriti truth and or the empirical truth, and Paramarth or the absolute truth. So when we look at the next one, the next text which comes under the head of argumentative work, it is Vigraha Vyavartini, which means the dispeller of disputes. In this work of 70 verses with an auto-commentary in prose, Nagarjuna responds to a set of specific objections raised against his system. So here these objections come both from Buddhist and non-Buddhist opponents, and it initiates discussions of topics which do not get much coverage in Nagarjuna's other works. And what are these topics which do not get coverage in Nagarjuna's other works? It is epistemology and the philosophy of language. So when we look at this particular text called Vigraha Vyavartini, it talks about epistemology and philosophy of language. And here Nagarjuna is efficient enough to give answer to all the critical objections raised against him. Then comes Vedalya Prakaran. It is the treatise on pulverization. It is very interesting and difficult work, and Nagarjuna sets out to refute the logical Buddhist logical categories of the non-Buddhist Nyaya school. So here we see that there is a critical analysis of the Nyaya school of non-Buddhist system. And Nyaya school is one of the most important philosophical school in the Indian philosophical thought. This text has never attracted the attention of classical commenters. This is one of the setbacks, that this particular text has never really attracted the attention of classical commentators. Then comes Ratnavali, or the precious garland. Ratnavali is a long text addressed to a king containing a comprehensive discussion of ethical questions. So Ratnavali talks about certain ethical questions, and it is a discussion, comprehensive discussion between a certain king and Nagarjuna himself. Because this discussion of the theory of emptiness plays a comparatively minor role in this text, it is sometimes subsumed under the epistolary work. So, Ratnavali can also be called the argumentative work as well as epistolary work. Then comes the second categorization. So, the first categorization is the argumentative work, and the second categorization is that of the hymns, which is called Chatushtava. There is some discussion which of the various hymns ascribed to Nagarjuna actually make up the quarter of the 4 hymns often referred to in the commentarial literature. They differ in interesting respect from the works mentioned in preceding sections. Common to many of them is a positive concept of ultimate truth, which ascribes specific qualities to it and gets close to the theory of Buddha nature. So here in this hymn part, we will see that there are a lot of hymns that are ascribed to the nature of the highest or the absolute, which is liberation, and the Tathagat Garb or the Buddha nature. So these hymns are dedicated to either the absolute, which is the Paramarth Sat, or to Tathagat Garb, which is the Buddha nature. So now when you look at absolute or the Buddha nature, there is not much of a difference between the two. A person who has developed Buddha Chit or Buddha nature is the one who is on the path to attain liberation. Third category comes to be that of epistolary work. So this includes a friendly letter which is called Surlekha. Like the precious garland Ratnavali, which is sometimes assigned to this group, addressed to a king. This fact may explain why the text is primarily concerned with ethical matters. It devotes relatively little space to the kind of philosophical discussions which is Nagarjuna's most characteristic contribution to Buddhist thought. So when we look at these works, the epistolary work is more like a letter to a king where Nagarjuna discusses certain philosophical questions, but in argumentative sense, it is not at all argumentary or work or a part of him. So it forms an epistolary work. So now when we look at the 3 categories, the first one is argumentative work, which has Mool Madhyamik Karika or the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. Then the second text is Yukti Shastika or the 60 stanzas on reasoning. Then comes Shonyata Shaptati or the 70 stanzas on emptiness. Then comes Vrigraha Vyavartini or the dispeller of disputes. And then comes Vaidalya Prakaran or the treatise on pulverization. And in the end we have Ratnavali, which can also be placed under the category of epistolary work. But here we are placing it in both the sections. So Ratnavali is the precious garland, and then comes the hymns, which is known as Chatushthav, and in the end we have the category of epistolary work, which is a friendly letter, which means Surlekh. And here we also place Ratnavali in this category. So these are the basic literary work of Nagarjuna. Now coming to the doctrines given by Nagarjuna, we see that Nagarjuna carefully denied that he gave a new philosophical teaching or a metaphysical theory. When we talk about the middle path, we hear stating that he avoids substantialism and nihilism. But when he is avoiding substantialism and nihilism, then he must be obviously propagating certain own doctrine, right? But the thing is that Nagarjuna as Buddha says that this is the middle path, avoid the two extremes, try to tread on this middle path and see it for yourself, but don't attach yourself to it as a doctrine. So we see here that Nagarjuna carefully denies that he gave a new philosophical teaching or a metaphysical theory. According to him, one who advances a view has to prove it necessarily to the people he wants to convince, and he also states that here he is not advancing any idea of his own. All he is doing is laying down the Buddha's teachings of the middle way regarding causation and its doctrines. So what Nagarjuna is trying to say here is that he is not propounding anything new. All he is doing is laying down the teachings of Buddha, which talk about causation and its doctrines. Certainly, Mool Madhyamik Karika is an attack on traditional Buddhism, which was sinking into philosophical argumentation and becoming attached to these arguments, each saying that they represented the highest wisdom of the Buddha. So what Nagarjuna has done is that in his one of the most important literary work, which is Mool Madhyamik Karika, he has critically analyzed the Buddhist as well as non-Buddhist schools, which try to point out that their philosophy or the doctrines is the ultimate. Nagarjuna presents us with the truth of life, that no thing is permanent and independent. When we look at the philosophical aspect of Nagarjuna, we see that he presents us with the truth of life. And what is that truth of life? It is that nothing in this entire phenomenal existence is permanent and independent. The phenomenal existence is essenceless, and thus the realization of this leads to the higher goal away from the indubitable suffering. The dealing into the ontological realm is futile. He further develops his dialectical method or Chatushkoti on this line of thesis and antithesis in order to lay down the Buddha's teachings of the middle way regarding causation and its doctrines, and also to state that while causation and dependent origination in themselves represent the very core of Buddhist philosophy, one should avoid clinging on to them like dogmas, pointing to the positionlessness of Madhyamik, which he terms to be a kind of absolute. So when we look at the philosophical doctrine of Nagarjuna, which is Madhyam Pratipad, the middle way, we see that he is stating here that while he is giving a particular way or Buddhist philosophy, presenting the core of Buddhist philosophy, one should avoid clinging on to it like a dogma. And then comes the dialectical method of Nagarjuna, also called Chatushkoti. Chatushkoti can be stated as all things or dharma exist. Affirmation of being, negation of non-being. All things, dharma, do not exist, which is affirmation of non-being and negation of being. Then comes the third point, which is all things or dharma both exist and do not exist, which states both affirmation and negation. Then comes all things or dharma neither exist nor do not exist. This points out to neither affirmation nor negation. This dialectic was directed against the dogmatists and the rationalists who maintained a definite view about reality. So when we look at the dialectical method, we see that the dialectical method or the Chatushkoti was directed against the dogmatists and the rationalists who viewed or maintained definite view about reality. Nagarjuna argued neither production nor destruction, neither annihilation nor permanence, neither unity nor difference, neither coming nor. So he takes a middle path or the Madhyam Marg, which avoids the extreme of production and destruction, of annihilation or permanence, of unity and of difference, and of coming and of going away. By exposing the hollowness of logic of the extremists and the self-contradictory consequences of their assumptions, Nagarjuna wanted to disapprove the claims of reason to apprehend the middle path. The middle path, however, is not a geometric mean between two extremes. So when we say a middle path here, we are not literally pointing out to a geometric mean between the two extremes. Rather, what we're trying to say, or what Nagarjuna said or meant, was that middle path is the realization of the interdependence and conditioned genesis of all the phenomena. So when we talk about the middle path, we are not pointing out to a certain geometric mean or a line which we have to follow and avoid falling on the two edges. But we are trying to say here is that middle path refers to the dependence and conditionedness of all genesis of phenomenal existence, which the great Mahayana philosopher Nagarjuna calls Shunyata. Shunyata is one of the most important aspect or concept given by Nagarjuna. So when we talk about Shunyata, we see that one who comprehends Shunyata pertinently, the same Nagarjuna tells us, comprehends the entire world pertinently. So we see here that what Nagarjuna is trying to say is that one who comprehends Shunyata pertinently comprehends the entire world. What do we mean by this? We are trying to say that one who knows what Shunyata is knows what the world is. And what is the world? World is the essencelessness and is conditioned. The central concept around which all of Nagarjuna's philosophy is built is the notion of emptiness, which is called Shunyata. Emptiness is of course always the emptiness of something, and the something Nagarjuna has in mind here is Swabhav. So when we talk about emptiness of a particular thing, which means that a particular thing is empty of a certain other thing. Here, what we are trying to say is that emptiness of the phenomenal existence is empty of Swabhav. Different terms have been used to translate this word into English. So when we look at this word Swabhav, it is translated as inherent existence and intrinsic nature, which appears to be the most popular choices. But substance and essence have also been proposed. So you could use any of these translations that have been given for Swabhav. None of these cover the full complexity of the term, however. When we look at this particular word Swabhav in all possible translations, we see that they fall short of defining the full complexity of the term. We therefore have to give some more detailed account of the way Swabhav is characterized in Nagarjuna's thought. By understanding what empty things are supposed to be empty of, we simultaneously gain a more precise understanding of the concept of emptiness. This is the true import, both philosophical and ethical, for all philosophical positions in Buddhism are also profoundly ethical. So, in Buddhism, philosophy is just not philosophy. It gives out a broad understanding of the ethical way of life. So for Buddhism, ethics and philosophy go hand in hand. To be able to understand the Buddhist philosophy, it gives us an ethical way of life. And if we practice an ethical way of life, that is Buddhist philosophical realm. Nagarjuna goes on to show that everything is dependent on something else to exist. Nothing can exist without something else existing. This is the meaning of emptiness. And this is dependent arising, which is called pratitya samutpad. Therefore, to entertain questions about nirvana, such as does it exist or is it not non-existence, is against the spirit of the middle way of comprehending everything, including nirvana, as dependently originated and empty of essentiality. Interestingly, Nagarjuna describes nirvana as unrelinquished, not reached, unannihilated, non-eternal, non-ceased, and non-arisen. Here there's a freedom fully and principally ethical. It's not prisoner to metaphysical realm, but it gives many more other systems an open understanding. Nagarjuna brings out the finest application of the deep contemplative thought of Buddha in his teachings. Though the teachings of Buddha are conventions of contemplations, yet they can be practiced in life without exhausting the individual. It is the realization of the existence, which is the result of causal law, pointing to its dependence on factors around. And this is what Nagarjuna had to say when he gave Madhyam Marg or Madhyamik system, which is the middle path. Thank you.